All right, this is Ubaid on behalf of Electronics, and in this video we'll be talking about consumer versus producer surplus. Okay, so difference between consumer and producer surplus. So if you look at a graph over here, okay, we know that this is supply. So this will be supply over here, and this will be demand. All right, and let's assume that this is price and this is quantity, either quantity supplied or quantity demanded, depending on the curve that you look at. Now, you do have points on the curve, okay, whether it's a demand curve as you move along the demand curve, you also have points on the supply curve, okay, when you move along the supply curve. All right, now, when it comes to consumer surplus, we're talking about demand. So we're talking about this curve over here, okay, and since this is the equilibrium point, okay, the consumer surplus will be the area that is about the equilibrium point. And underneath the, so let's say this is your demand curve, underneath your demand curve. And the reason why it's the area underneath the demand curve is because the consumers were willing to pay this price. They were willing to pay this price. They were willing to pay this price. They were willing to pay this price and receive this quantity. Okay, they were willing to pay this price and receive this quantity. They were willing to pay this price and receive this quantity, so on and so forth. Okay, however, what they ended up paying was the equilibrium price, okay, which is this price over here. This is PEQ. And because they ended up paying the equilibrium price, they received this quantity over here, which is equilibrium quantity. Okay, so this is quantity EQ. And that's the reason why this area, just underneath the demand curve and about the equilibrium, is your consumer surplus, which is the difference between what they were willing to pay versus what they actually paid. Okay? And likewise, you have your producer surplus over here. So let me label this over here. This is your consumer surplus. All right, and further down, this area beneath the equilibrium line over here, and just above the supply curve, this area will be your producer surplus. And this is based on the same concept, except this time we're talking about suppliers. Okay, so the suppliers were willing to accept this price, okay, and this quantity. They were willing to accept this price and this quantity. Okay, so all the points along the curve. All right, and that's the reason why when they ended up accepting this price, okay, the price at equilibrium, they received this quantity. Hence the area just about the supply curve that has to do with all the points along the curve. And beneath the equilibrium line over here for price will be your producer surplus. All right, and when you add these two together, okay, you have something called total surplus, okay, or also known as social surplus. Okay, so this may be an extension of the definition for normative and positive statement. Okay, so when it comes to your positive statement, we know from the last video that this is what the world actually looks like. So in terms of consumers and producers, this is what they actually paid. The equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity is what they actually got. Okay, one received, one supplied. Okay, and when it comes to your normative statement, this is what should have been, which means that the points on the curve, whether the supply or demand curve, is the price either the producer or the supplier, okay, or the consumer, okay, would have accepted. Okay, so that would be an example of a normative statement. Now, this is what could have happened. Okay, and you can't really say true or false to that. Okay, however, this is what actually happened. Okay, and which is your equilibrium point, your equilibrium price, and equilibrium quantity. On behalf of B Electronics, this is Ubay. Have yourself a great day.